G'day, my name is Jez Santos and I'm a contributor to the NuPattern project on CodePlex. So the question I want to answer today is, what is this NuPattern technology all about? I'm going to try and answer that question by showing you how easy it is to build your own pattern toolkit projects and the types of things that pattern toolkits can do for you. For a lot of people, it'll probably be a new way of thinking about how you develop and deploy your software from the way you're used to doing it today. The power of NuPattern actually lies in your ability to create custom tooling in Visual Studio that can be used on your specific projects, or for perhaps demonstrating your own best practices in developing and deploying software across your organization, or for your community followers. NuPattern is a very rich platform, and the possibilities to what NuPattern can do for you are in fact completely up to your own imagination. So we can't really demonstrate everything that NuPattern could do for you in this short video. Nor can I tailor this video to your specific projects right now. At best, all I can really hope to achieve is to give you a sense of what a pattern toolkit is, what NuPattern's about, so that you can take away a good understanding of what NuPattern can do for you and your organizations. And of course, we also hope that you could see the potential for building your own tooling for your own needs with this technology. So without further ado, let's get into it and see what this project's all about. We've just installed NuPattern from the Visual Studio gallery, and you can also install it from the CodePlex site too. We simply start by creating a new project in Visual Studio called Pattern Toolkit. We're going to call this one Demo Toolkit because it really doesn't build anything useful for anyone. It's just for demo purposes. A pattern toolkit is really just a package of tools around something we call a pattern. And so anybody using your toolkit would actually be building an instance of your pattern from it. We'll call that Demo Pattern and proceed. As you might expect, we get a couple of projects in the Solution Explorer, but you'll also notice a couple of new windows open in Visual Studio. The first one is the pattern model, and on the right hand side we've got the Solution Builder with all the elements of the toolkit in it, and down the bottom here we've got the Guidance Explorer window. Now in this window you're going to see topics, guidance, that's contextualized to building a toolkit. We have lots of information here. It's quite extensive guidance, but it mainly contains topics around how to work with your toolkit, how to build your toolkit, and how to do all the other actions that are necessary to build a toolkit in terms of modeling, assets, guidance, automation, building and deploying a toolkit. For now, we're just going to get rid of this guidance and move on with demonstrating how to build a toolkit. There's a ton of stuff to do here, but I'm going to first start by building out the pattern that's contained in our toolkit. You can see the toolbox here has got some pretty simple tools in it. The first thing is I'm going to create a collection here called Generated Things for things that the toolkit's going to generate, and then I'm going to fast forward a bit and show you the rest of the pattern model. We're also going to add some properties in here called variable properties to each of these elements. We've got two up on the root element. We got a property here on each of the other child elements. One of the more common things people like to do with toolkits is to create their own project in Visual Studio. For this, we use what are called Visual Studio templates, and these templates are pretty tricky to make from scratch, but VS can help you create them from an existing project, which is a common starting point for reusing code. We're just going to use the common C# library template that we've copied from Visual Studio. Alright, now that we have the template imported, we have to tell our toolkit where and when to unfold it. To do that, we configure a piece of automation called a template launch point on the root element of the model. This is the piece of automation that unfolds the template into the solution. All we have to do is configure the settings of the launch point to use our newly imported template, which you can pick from the list. To make the demo a little bit more interesting, we're going to configure the root element to allow us to navigate to the unfolded project. And also, when we delete the root element, please delete the project associated to it. Alright, with that done, it's time to get some generated code into that project template. To generate code or text files in general, we need to create what's called a text template. This is a template that contains generated code mixed with procedural code that makes decisions about what code to generate. The next part is a little tricky to get right first time. We want a generated code file to be created for every instance of the generated code element in the pattern model. So we have to type the template code to the type of the element in the pattern model, where we plan to use the template. It's kind of like data binding. So we're just going to copy and paste the name of the element from the pattern model into the generated code. Next, we're going to define our actual generated code. You can do anything you want here in any language you like, and you can also insert procedural code to determine what exact code to output. It's extremely flexible, but we don't have a great deal of time to show you proper coding examples here. The best we can do right now is generate a class for you and have a property that reads values from the pattern model itself. All we want to do is create a class using the name of the instance of the generated code element in the pattern model, that's instance name, and use the value of the property3 property as the return value in the getter, which you can see. Now initially that property3 isn't going to have a value, so we're going to go back to the pattern model and set its default value to be a fruit of some kind. Let's say pear. Now that we have a text template, we have to tell our toolkit where and when to use it. For this example, we need to find some automation called a command. And this particular command we're going to call generate code file for obvious reasons. In its settings, we need to select the command type that generates code for us. Once we do that, we're going to get a new set of properties, and the only real one that we need to configure at this point is to bind it to the text template that we just created. And you can do that from picking the list. Now we have a command which will generate our code, but we haven't told our toolkit when to generate the code. For that, we need to configure another piece of automation called an event launch point. You can think of it as just like a trigger. This one we'll call generate code file and instantiate, and you can see why in a second. Okay, in the launch point settings now, we tell it to execute the new command we just created, generate code file, and we tell it to do that when the element is instantiated. And that's it. The last thing to do here, just for the demo, is to tell the generated code element to let us navigate to the generated code file and delete it when we delete the element instance. Let's move on to something completely different. Remember the project template we had at the root node? Well, it's got an app.config file in here, and what I want to show you here is synchronizing some data from the pattern model into artifacts into the solution. For that, we're going to use a different piece of automation, again a command here, but this time we'll just call it update app.config. This time we're going to use a command type for dealing with XML configuration files. There's a bit more to configure on this particular command type. First part is getting access to the file that we want to update. Don't worry too much about this notation, but basically it identifies the app.config file that's unfolded into the project, into the solution. The next XPath query project is going to be the XPath statement to get to the element within that XML file that we want to update. In this case, it's the add element with an attribute, the key attribute, which has a value of property1. Finally, for this command, we need to tell it what value to write into that XML attribute. And for this, we're going to use this notation of squiggly brackets property1, which identifies the property1 property on the pattern element. Now we need to tell our pattern model when to actually run that command. Again, we'll use an event launch point here. And I think for this demo, we'll get the synchronization of the file to occur on a build event in Visual Studio, so that when we build the solution, the file gets updated. Again, we select the command we want to run, in this case, update app.config. And for the event type, we're going to select the Visual Studio build started event, which runs before the build occurs and after the code is generated. Another thing I want to do here is show you another kind of command. We're going to add a command that actually builds the solution to our pattern model. So we're going to use a command type called a Visual Studio command. And these commands are pretty cool because you can run any Visual Studio command you like as the value here. And to find out the various values, if you go to Tools, Options in Visual Studio, go to the Keyboard selection, here are all the types of commands that you can run in Visual Studio. We want the build solution command, so it's build.buildSolution. We're just going to copy that into the value here. And now we have a command that will actually build the solution. Again, a command is pretty useless until you've triggered it. So again, we're going to add another launch point. This case, it's going to be a context menu launch point. It's going to give us a menu to run the command. We'll call this one build solution on menu, and that'll put a menu on the pattern element that we can use to run this command. So again, we select the command we want, and in this case, we just want some menu text. So we'll just say build solution, and that will run that command for us. Okay, we're not quite done. Not only can toolkits output stuff to the solution like I've just shown you previously, but they can also take inputs from artifacts already created in the solution, and that's what I wanted to show you next. On the monitored things collection element, I'm going to create a command called monitor code file. And what I wanted to use this for was capturing a file in the solution, dragging it onto this collection, and then we're going to create a monitor code collection. Monitor code element using this type of command. And what this type of command requires is that we define what kind of elements we can drag and drop and what element we're going to create when something is dropped. In this case, it's the monitored code element. So we'll paste that there. Like most of these commands, we now need a launch point to run the command. In this case, we're going to use the drag drop launch point. We'll call it monitor code file on drop. It's a special kind of launch point. The settings are a little different here. We're going to use the drop command as the monitor code file command. We can also output some status text here to tell the user what we're doing when they're dragging and dropping. And then we need to alter the drop conditions collection to allow or disallow when something can be dragged and dropped. And this dropped items solution item thing needs to be told that we're only going to permit dropping CS files. Alright, last thing to do here is that when we drop the file onto the collection, we want to read some data from that file into a property of ours, property 4. For that, we're going to use the value provider. Value provider is a bit of automation that calculates values or reads values from the environment. We're going to read the path of the dropped item just to show you that we've captured that file. And this particular value provider needs us to tell it what kind of file that we're expecting there. And that's pretty much drag and drop all set up for us with our element. Alright, so last thing in the toolkit, remember the guidance that we saw at the start of the demo? Well, every toolkit can have its own guidance, and you can configure the guidance to be activated on any element in the pattern model. Here we're just going to activate it on the root element, the pattern element of the pattern model. I'm just going to set that up here and tell us to have one instance for all instances of this toolkit. Then we're going to head over to the Solution Builder window in our guidance element, and we're going to edit that guidance. Now, if you have a look in Solution Explorer, you'll see the guidance document. You might have to set it up to open it in Word by default. And we're just going to do the bare minimum here to get this going. We're going to remove the first section, the one that says delete me, and the last couple of sections, which is just give you a style guide for writing these documents. You can see in Word we've got headings of various levels, and you can see the structure of the guidance in the navigation pane on the left. We'll just save that document now, go back to our toolkit and build the guidance. Alright, we're done with our toolkit, configuring it up. It's time to build it and run it and see how it works. So we'll build the solution. You can see the output trace here, build succeeds. Yep. And if you go to the project folder of your Pattern Toolkit project, into the output directory, you can see that Visual Studio's built us a V6. This is the file that you download in the Visual Studio Extension Manager and share with others. Let's start by debugging the toolkit. There isn't a whole lot to debug, no code really to debug at this point, but what this will do is it'll install the toolkit into an instance of Visual Studio called the experimental instance, and here we're going to start using our toolkit. Alright, now onto the fun stuff. In the experimental instance of Visual Studio, we're going to create an instance of your pattern. Remember that project template that we configured on the pattern element right at the start of the demo? Well, there it is, demo pattern. It's going to unfold a project for us, and you should see the app.config file in there as well. You'll also notice that when you're using toolkits, you'll be using the Solution Builder window too. And sure enough, in the Guidance Explorer, here's the guidance that we just finished building, all the different concepts and so forth. Just going to put that to one side for a second. First thing we're going to do here is we're going to play around with some of these properties. So property 1 and 2 will give some values. Again, fruits seem to be good popular values to use these days. Pineapple, bananas. And we're going to right click, and sure enough, there's the build solution menu. If we click that, what we're expecting is that the app.config file has updated the value of property 1. You can see that. If we change that again, let's make it into a lemon and again build the solution. And you'll see this dialog pop up, says the code's been regenerated, and sure enough, there's the lemon value. Alright, now let's see some generated code action. On the generated things element, remember we added that generated code element. Let's give that a name. And when this element's created, we should see some code created in the solution. Let's go to that solution item. Sure enough, there's the code file that was generated. It's got the value of the instance name, and remember the value of that property 3 that we put in there, so it's taken the default value of pair. So there's an example of generating code into your solution. Alright, that final thing that we set up was the drag drop launch point. So watch this. I'm going to drag a file from the solution, drop it on that collection. It's going to create an element of class 1 for us. Just have to close that file, sorry. If I open up that file again, you'll see that it's linked to the class 1 file we just dragged, and if we look in the properties grid, we can see that property 4 has the value of that file as it is on disk. And so it's a great example of showing how you can drag elements from the solution into your pattern model to create elements that monitor or do things with your solution. And that concludes the demo of the demo toolkit. We hope you enjoyed watching the demo, and even though this particular toolkit probably isn't going to help you do software any better, we at least hope you got an idea of what pattern toolkits are now all about and how easy they are to build yourself, and that you can now build your own software development and deployment toolkits with your best practices and knowledge for your organizations or your community followers. Please stay in touch with the project at the NuPattern.org site.